Well, tell me, mama, what's going on? Tell me, darling, what's going on?
Welcome back, everybody. Bacon and Egg Show, show number 16, 8/8/2020. And we got a lot going on. Jay, how's it going?
Hey, man. Going all right. Some interesting things have developed over the last week, some things that I've come to a realization, and also just a bunch to talk about in the sports world, man. So looking forward to the show, looking forward to getting going. So let's dive right into our cup of coffee.
Let's do it. Cup of coffee. Let's hit on the Astros. Let's jump right into that. Astros loss in extra innings. I don't have the number right in front of me, but just mentioning that it seems like at least half the games the Astros have played in the season have gone to extra innings, right?
Like it
seems like a substantial amount of them have been.
Feels like every other night they're playing in an extra innings game, and I don't know what that's at. You know, a lot of times, especially over the stretch of 162 games, you'll see, you know, a team overachieve maybe because they won so many one-run games. They won all the close games. And law of averages will bring most teams back to normal on some of those. So in a shortened season like this where the Astros don't seem to be on the good end of a lot of those close games, it could really be disastrous for even making the playoffs if they don't start to come out on the other end of that.
Yeah. So on that note, the Astros are now under 500 on the season. Now 3.5 games back of the Oakland A's after last night's loss to Oakland. Two more. It's a 3-game series, right? So 2 more games against Oakland before I think it's against the San Francisco Giants. But the Astros have to win these last 2 games in this series. I mean, I know it's early in the season, but as you just mentioned, 60 games shortened season. You get swept by the division leader, and you end up being 5.5 games back. You know, as we start to near the quarter way point of this season, that's not good. But not only that, like, you know, I know the Astros are still sitting second in the AL West, 3.5 back of Oakland, but they're only 2 games ahead of last place Seattle in the division, a 1.5 games ahead of the Rangers and the Angels. This is a pretty tight division. And even if the Astros get, you know, a little bit of this momentum back and can get a win or 2 against Oakland here, they're going to have to keep it up because that second spot, which will be a playoff position in the division, can start slipping away pretty quickly if they're not careful.
Well, and we discussed the possibility of some of these divisions just all being so close to, you know, like where there's going to only, at the end of the season, between first and last place, there might only be a 2 or 3 game difference over a 60-game stretch. You know, you see that. You don't see that over the stretch of a normal season, but in the shortened season that we're dealing with, you might see that anyway. So every one of these games, especially against someone like you said over the top of you in the division, are important. And they can't get swept in this series. They have to at least take one of these. But winning both of them would at least set them in the right direction of trying to get back above 500. It's just not. You look at their schedule coming up.
It's not easy.
A series against the Giants, and then you get the Mariners, and then you get the Rockies back-to-back series there. So, and then the Padres are playing well. So, I mean, yeah, it's setting up where each one of these wins is going to be seen even bigger when you're at the bottom looking up in this situation. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they turn it around. This is a team that I told you, I think I said to you in the message earlier today or last night, this is a team that can run off 10 in a row easily. With the talent that they have on there, they've shown in seasons past that with this roster, with this type of roster, they could run off 10 in a row. They're running out of time to be able to use that in their, you know, have that in their back pocket. You know, they're going to need to start taking the steps to play as a team that is above 500 baseball club. So they're going to need to make this decision pretty quickly as a team to figure out what it's going to need to take to do it.
Well, and I wonder, I'm curious. I mean, especially looking through the lens of last night's game, 1 run scored in the first 12 innings of the game last night. They didn't score the second run until the 13th, and then Oakland came back and ended up winning the game 3-2 in the 13th inning. Greinke pitched well.
Yep.
He pitched really well. I mean, he did everything that you want Zach Greinke to do. It seems like this almost reminds me, I guess, what was it? Would have been the 2016 season. So the year after the Astros kind of surprised people and had that playoff run, eventually losing to the Royals. But the 2016 season where things just didn't really seem to click, ended up missing out on the playoffs the year before the World Series run. And it's like the pitching will be on one night, but the offense is completely dormant. The bats come alive one night, but then the pitching just gets absolutely shelled. And it's kind of having that vibe right now where and not to mention the injuries. Springer's dinged up a little bit. Not to mention what's happening to the pitching staff. Verlander, we still don't know his status for the rest of the season. Nothing's official there. Osuna's done. I don't like where it's trending, and there needs to be some kind of. This is not the best start to the series against Oakland. I was hoping if they could go to Oakland and take all three of these, take back charge of the division, that maybe that's the start of the momentum. I just don't like where it's trending. I mean, we'll see. I think they're absolutely capable of rattling off that streak, like you mentioned. But I mean, I guess we'll know soon enough. But yeah, it's just untimely situations where things just seem to go wrong.
When you're at the quarter pole of your season and you've lost your ace and your closer for the season, because you and I are both under the impression that we won't see Verlander pitch this year, I believe.
I don't think so.
Are we in the same boat there? Okay.
Yeah. I think they're holding off on making it official for whatever reason. I don't think we're going to see him till next year.
When you've already lost your ace and your closer, Greinke looks like he's forming, taking form. But it's going to take. Oh, and they've already decided that they're moving Josh James to the bullpen, which sort of makes me feel like they're going to slide him into that closer role before long. He's got the closer stuff, so I don't see why you would make that decision this early in the season, and also unless you thought you had another arm that you could bring into the rotation to take his place. Now, we've seen some of these young pitchers making their major league debuts and pitching well in their young careers. Can that be sustainable over the stretch of this season, over 5 or 6 more starts? I'm not sure, but you have to believe as an Astros fan that the bats and the pitching will start to align soon. Like they haven't been aligning, like you mentioned. You have to believe they'll come back to the middle somehow and sort of start to meet at least, and some of this luck will go their way. I mean, I feel like it's going to have to turn around at some point, right?
I would hope so, but it's starting to worry me a little bit, like it did in the postseason last year, where it was. I mean, especially, and I know the Nationals were loaded pitching wise, but those situations where the Astros are getting guys on base, but just untimely batting. It was okay. All you need is a base hit here to drive in a couple runs, and you're in command. And they just couldn't do it. And that seems to have carried over from the postseason to now, where it's like, okay, it's not so much a matter of getting guys on base, but it's finishing the job and actually getting some runs on the board out of it. And yeah, it's concerning because the pitching, the pitching here and there, I mean, has at least the starting pitching has hung in there. I mean, McCullers wasn't great, or hasn't been great, I guess, since his first start of the season. That's almost kind of expected, though, in a way, given how long he had been out. But you think it has to start clicking, but I don't. What's the latest on Springer's health? Is he going to miss any time, or is that?
I haven't heard anything other than he's day to day. I think they're kind of playing that close, keeping that close to the vest. I don't think they're letting much get out of that. You hope it's one of those things where, he's just going to take a couple of days off and then get back in there. I like Tucker hitting out of the leadoff spot, to be honest with you. I'd like Tucker anywhere in the top 4 of the lineup. And Springer not being in that leadoff hole, I know Tucker's hit there at least once. I would like him there to stay near the top of that lineup. So Maybe Springer taking a day or two off isn't that bad. Get Tucker some time up at the top and then sort of fill in the gaps and let him get 100% healthy before you try to rush him back. But hopefully it's nothing bigger than that. But I haven't heard anything else on it.
Well, it's something to keep an eye on. Yeah, I hope you need Springer back. I hope that there's no kind of lingering issue there. That I believe this is technically could be his final season in Houston contract-wise. You hope that it's not one of those situations where with everything going on that he decides to shut it down if there's some kind of lingering issue and call it a season. But we'll see. I mean, I don't think he seems to be the type of player that'll be out there as soon as he can get out there. So,
yep.
But yeah, Astros need to get it going. We'll see how this next week plays out. Hopefully they're starting to get back over that hump and back into the first place spot in that division. So,
hope so.
All right, well, let's move on to we'll stay with Major League Baseball, but we'll kind of get into Pandemic Weekly here.
Yeah.
Speaking about, we're talking about where the Astros are going to be around that halfway point of the season. Jay, are we going to get there? Are we going to get to that point of the season? Are you confident that Major League Baseball will actually be playing 2-3 weeks, a month from now?
I don't see how this season finishes. I mean, I just don't. You've got a situation like they've ended up canceling the Cardinals and Cubs entire series this weekend. Originally was only going to be they were only originally going to postpone Friday night's game, and then they decided to postpone the whole thing. St. Louis hasn't played since the 29th.
That's incredible. I hadn't realized that they've been off that long.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
They won't play. They don't have another game scheduled until the 10th. So from July 29th until August 10th, there's that big of a gap in between when St. Louis will have played a game.
That's an eternity in a Major League Baseball season. That's an eternity.
Especially one that only lasts 60 games. Is only supposed to be 60 games long. So I don't know how they can get this season back on track, because they're going to get to the point where they're going to have to make a decision in terms of, well, are we going to let this team who to win percentage-wise is above this other team in the standings, but they have however many games left in hand, or vice versa? It doesn't matter. If you have 12 games in hand, on another team, how fair is it to advance, to play a playoff series? You know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't know how you do this. I don't know how you make this fair. I don't know what's the point to where they have to cancel so many games for one particular club, where it just has to be, the whole thing has to be called up. I don't know where that line is.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, now we've seen at this point, it's been the Marlins, the Cardinals. You're starting to see this get around a little bit. My concern is, as we get a little bit further into the season, that maybe teams start to be a little more relaxed on protocol. It's bound to happen, just numbers wise, the amount of players and staff and everybody. And it's going to be one of these teams, like you look at, I'm not saying that the Astros are the ones, that are in this situation, but you look at, the Astros have been on the road for a bit. And it's one of those things where, with how the virus behaves and how you get test results and the incubation period, all that kind of stuff, like that one of these teams are going to have a whole slew of positive results, but they've been on the road for the last 10, 11 days, and they've already been in 3 different cities and played 3 different teams. And now all of a sudden you've got 4 teams probably within a division that have all been playing each other over the last 2 weeks that now got to shut it down for 2 weeks. And I think that's I think that'll be kind of the breaking point where MLB just goes, you know what, it's one thing to have like an isolated team like the Marlins or the Cardinals, and we can kind of like work that out. If you have like a whole division or a whole, like in the Astros case, whole West Coast of teams go down over it, like how do you continue? You can't do that. It's just not equitable. Not that MLB cares about that, but
no, they don't. They don't, and especially if the right teams are in the right positions for the playoff system. But you look at this. You look at it. The Marlins are 7-1
On the winning percentage, they would be the NL East champs. Like they're in the playoffs now, and they've played what,
They're the
half the
one
games?
seed. Yeah, they're the one seed. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this develops, but just specifically revolving around there only being like if the Cardinals, I think they have 9 players and 7 staff that have tested positive at this point. 9 players and 7 staff. If that lingers, I mean, nobody's going to want to play against that team. Like, you want to get on the field and I don't know how that – it's tough. Miami seems to have gotten it under control, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm skeptical that it'll actually
I don't
be
think
able to
it'll get
finish.
I don't think it'll get done. I just don't see it happening.
Well, let's move on to a league that has been able to get it done and has been able to
Yeah.
get everything locked down and do it the right way. Let's talk some NBA. Lakers are the number 1 seed. I don't think that's any surprise, given the season that they've had up to this point. Any thoughts on the Lakers, LeBron, and what they're looking at heading into the postseason?
I think they'll just cruise in and they'll still play a little bit, but I think you'll see LeBron taking some nights off. Anthony Davis taking some nights off. He's been a little banged up. I know he had an eye injury, got poked in the eye or something coming in. You're going to see them rest, especially in this time. It's what a perfect time to let the best players in basketball rest for your team and get ready for the playoff run. It's going to be interesting because there's only one spot in the NBA that's up for grabs still.
Yeah,
and it's that 8th seed in the West, and but there's only 3 or 4 games left for each team. There's a 2-game gap there, I believe, at the bottom of the standings. So I think the Spurs are running out of time here to help that streak continue. I think they're going to have a difficult time making it in.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're pretty much locked into your playoff teams now. And I have one of the things that I was hinting at earlier in terms of a realization for me. I haven't watched as much NBA as I thought I would when it came back. I've watched a little bit, I've watched some. I watched the Rockets. I've watched a couple of games. I watched the Lakers play. I watched some games here and there. But I really thought that would have been one of the things I would have really gotten back into wall to wall, and I didn't. I haven't. Have you noticed that now that sports has been back? Have you noticed that your intake has it been what you thought it would be once all these games came back?
It has been for the NHL. I've been locked in. It's been, but see, on your point about the NBA, I haven't watched as much NBA as I thought I would either, and I wonder how much of it. I haven't quite thought about it up till you mentioning this. How much of it has to do with the fact that it is like kind of finishing out the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
Like for the most part, we kind of know who the top seeds are going to be. And now it's just kind of like sorting out order. Rockets are safe. The Mavs are in. The Spurs are really kind of that only story there about maybe getting that last spot. But otherwise, it's kind of like we're just playing out the regular season. And I wonder if once we get to the postseason here soon, that the interest goes back up.
Yeah.
Because I know that's been the big thing for me with the NHL coming back has been every game's been important. It's playoff hockey right out of the gate, and it's been compelling, and we'll get to NHL talk a little bit later, but like I think that's been the big thing for me is it's meaningful. Not only is it back, but it's meaningful.
Right. Yeah, I guess I sort of was always just really tuned in a lot once the playoffs hit for the NBA, and it seems like my attitude has stayed the same. I think I will tune in once I know it's playoff basketball. I don't know. It surprised me. I thought with it at my fingertips, I would want to watch it more. And you're right. It's just that the intrigue hasn't been there for me. Like, it's not a playoff setting, even though a playoff setting in a bubble, it's going to be. But just the intensity, knowing that it's playoff basketball, brings something else to the table for sure.
Yeah, it's not a case where like, we're kind of talking about, hey, Lakers versus Warriors tonight, battle for like the number 1 seed in the West or something like, and everybody's full go. We're kind of talking about we mentioned, like LeBron and Anthony Davis kind of taking some time off to get ready for the postseason, and it just doesn't have the same, like everything's kind of been settled. It's kind of just running out the clock on the regular season here, and I think the interest will ramp up though for sure.
Yep.
So moving on to another another sport in a season that hasn't kicked off yet, but it's getting close. It's definitely not in a bubble. It's
maybe it's close.
yeah, maybe. And we're getting to, it's NCAA football. And before we get to the news that dropped earlier today, a little catch up. The Big 12 has decided on a 10-game conference schedule, a 10-game, 9 conference, 1 non-conference game. So I don't, sometimes this all gets blurred as we do these shows kind of week to week, all the news that drops between Saturday to Saturday. SEC is going conference only. Big 10 has gone conference only. ACC is going conference only +1. Big 12 is conference only +1. And Pac-12 is conference only, right?
I believe, yep.
So it's really just the Big 12 and ACC that are going to play 1 non-conference game each. I've heard Texas already had UTEP on the schedule. I'm hearing that that's going to potentially stick as the 1 non-conference game for Texas this year. Due to the SEC making their change, the Texas game at LSU is off, and we don't know if that's ever going to get rescheduled or how that's going to work out. So no Texas at LSU this year, which is too bad, but it's not that big of a surprise.
Yeah.
Does UTEP make sense for EJ in terms of having a non-conference game in Austin to open up the season, if there's a season that does end up opening up?
That's what lines up. It makes sense. It makes the most sense for me. I mean, to me, just in terms of trying to keep it as normal as you could. I think that's got to be the one for me to happen. If it's going to happen, that'll be the opener. So I don't know if it's going to be interesting to see how all the conference. I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this with the imbalance of not either being conference only or being able to play somebody out of your conference. The quality of those out of conference opponents probably won't be as tough usually as your in conference foes. So I wonder if that'll be taken into consideration when it comes down to polls at the end of the year, a strength of schedule type of in terms of the balance, how that will be taken into consideration, because UTEP is definitely not equitable to an all Pac-12, Pac-10 conference or whatever conference schedule, Pac-12.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out in terms of looking at strength of schedule and all that kind of stuff. I think I'm curious if the Big 12 would have done away with the non-conference if the schedule was, or if the conference was actually 12 teams. I think the fact that that a team can only play 9 conference games in the season, I wonder how much that had to do with it.
That's almost necessary, right? Because everybody else is playing 10 games, so it's almost, you have to do it. I mean, it has to be a part of your schedule, but it's like, well, that's not somebody in the SEC or the Big Ten is going to look at that and be like, well, if at the end of the season the argument is, well, if our records are equal, look at who we played,
right?
Compared to, well, if Texas played UTEP, no offense to UTEP, but it is what it is. So yeah, that's the argument at the end of the year, and I guess that's something that you can worry about when you cross that bridge, if we even cross that bridge. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and hopefully this is just hopefully it all like I'm just rooting for anarchy in the Big 12 anyway, because anything to make the conference look like
just a
the
dumpster fire, and
just expose it even, like for the dumpster fire that it is. But yeah, it'll be interesting if we can actually get this season rolling. But yeah, that kind of segues into the big news of the morning, I guess, with the Mid-American Conference becoming the first FBS conference to go ahead and say, nope, we're shutting it down. No football this year. So
now to be sure that I'm clear on that, it's no football this season at all. They're not bumping it to the spring. They're not doing it in no kind of shuffling around the deck chairs or anything. It's no football for the 22-21 season.
Right.
That's big. I mean, and those are not, those aren't tiny programs. I mean, Akron, Northern Illinois, Central Michigan, those are programs that have made some noise, put
Northern
players into the
Illinois,
league.
yeah, and in Northern Illinois, especially in that conference, they've really been one of the biggest, I guess, one of the top dogs in that conference since they've joined. And basically, my understanding is they were saying, look, guys, if you guys are going to play, we're not going to be involved with your conference this season. And
Wow.
it was apparently that was one of the sort of behind the scenes parts of this. But it's interesting that they've taken this step. And will this be a stepping stone for commissioners of the Power Five to sort of look at and say, okay, are we going to have to start considering this?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because right before we started recording today, Bruce Feldman, college football reporter, basically came out and said that this decision that the MAC made, I'll just quote his tweet right here. He says, lots of rumblings about whether the MAC's decision will be a tipping point for other presidents of FBS schools. Both Matt Fortuna and I have been hearing a lot in the past 24 hours about the Big Ten having a lot of doubt about whether trying to play in the fall is the right thing. The Big Ten was the first conference to come out and say they were canceling non-conference games. They were only going to play a conference schedule. Everybody else kind of fell in line after that. If the Big Ten is the first of the Power Five conferences to come out and say we're not playing in the fall, whether that means they play in the spring or there's no football at all, is this going to be something that forces the other conferences into doing similar?
Yeah, if the Big Ten cancels, I mean, this is, like you said, they sort of set the tone, took the lead in deciding that they weren't going to play non-conference games. And I think that the commissioners of other conferences would have to look at that and say, how can we have a season? How can you play a college football season without the Big Ten, or without the SEC, or without the Big 12, or without the ACC even? I think it would have to be they would have to take it under great consideration at that point if the Big Ten decide to make that move.
I think at that point, the easiest thing for everybody else involved would be if the Big Ten just said they weren't playing at all. I think what would complicate matters the most is if the Big Ten says, well, we're going to play in the spring, while the rest of the Power Five conferences are still deciding to play in the fall. I think if the Big Ten says, we're just not going to play at all, I think that's easier for the rest of the Power Five to go, okay, well, we're still going to play our schedules, and the Big Ten just won't be playing football this year. But I think if they try to reschedule and play in the spring, I mean, if the SEC and the Big 12 say, well, we're not going to let the Big Ten tell us when and where to play, we're going to play in the fall, you can play in the spring if you want. How do you determine a national champ? How do you determine a playoff if there is one? What about recruiting, National Signing Day, scholarship numbers? When does camp start in the summer? Like, I think if the Big Ten says we're playing in the spring, we don't care what the rest of you do. I think that is the atomic bomb that is dropped on the NCAA, and just completely, because at that point, we've talked about before how useless of a governing body the NCAA is over not just college football, but college athletics in general.
Yeah, garbage.
Now at this point, it's basically like the conference is turning guns on each other at that point. There is no cooperation that's going to be happening. So I think the SEC, the Big 12, everybody's sitting there going, crossing their fingers saying, just cancel your season. Because if you move it to the spring and we don't want to move to the spring, now it's going to get ugly. And you talk about having chaos. I mean, maybe it's the best thing to happen.
Man,
blow this thing up.
In terms of wanting anarchy, that to me is another part of that. That could be the first step in just blowing the whole thing up. the Power Five conferences deciding at that point, well, we don't need the NCAA anyway. We're going to do our own thing. I think that could be a best case scenario out of this crazy, what's going to be a crazy season if it's played. I would love there to be college football.
Yeah, I think everybody. I absolutely agree. Yeah,
but not having a true, like, to have a season compromise and just have some sort of half-ass entertainment, putting these young athletes at risk for future health just so we can watch some football. I'm not a fan of that thought anyway, but especially if one entire conference decides to cancel them, like, and that's I don't.
Just
I'm having a
scrap the
hard
whole
time.
thing.
Yeah.
If the Big Ten, whatever they end up doing, we'll see, and we'll see whatever comes of that Bruce Feldman kind of hint, and he's very, very in tune with a lot of athletic directors and insiders and everything around the college football world. So if he's hinting that the Big Ten is thinking about making a big decision on this, it's probably coming, and I'm sure by this time next week, I would imagine we'll hear something as we will be getting to mid-August and approaching what was supposed to be the start. What Oklahoma is opening up on the 29th, I think, in 3 weeks.
Right. I know it's easy for us to sit here and say, like, don't play football. But Rod Babers the other day, I heard him say that like every home game for the Longhorns brings over $60 million of money gets put into the city of Austin for every home game. Now, if you're at 25% capacity, which even if there is 25% capacity, I don't know. Well, in Austin, for the Longhorns, it'll probably get filled. But, I mean, at that point, the economic impact is already so large in terms of the hit that you were taking. Like, where do you draw the line at safety versus the money coming into the city? And it's a difficult line to walk along. And I don't know, man.
I think
I'm
there's
so
a lot
conflicted on this sometimes, but other times I'm just like, don't play. Like,
well, that's the thing. The more that we kind of start getting into these factors, it almost starts coming like the path of least resistance is just don't have a season. Because I was talking about this with somebody the other day about, like, okay, well, what if UT, 25,000, the city of Austin has said they hope that UT doesn't allow 25,000 into games. Which I agree. 25, you can't open bars or have groups of 10 or more people getting together right now, but somehow 25,000 people in a football stadium yelling and everything going on is somehow permissible. But beyond that point, like, once you start getting below that number, when is it actually worth UT allowing anybody into the games? There's so many, like, logistical challenges that they face in terms of staffing entry and exit and coordinating all that. If there's going to be any concessions, how do you keep people separated in line? What about restrooms? What about policing tailgate situations and trying to keep people distanced? You have to pay staff to manage a stadium on game day. At what point does the number of people showing up just not make it worth all of that trouble when you can just play the game behind closed doors? Like you said, you're already taking the financial hit on it. Like, at what point does the cost just outweigh any benefit of having 10,000 people in a stadium?
Yeah. I guess, playing the games, at least if you're able to play the games and you're able to keep the teams safe, and it's just so hard. The NBA has not had any positive tests lately. The NHL, I believe, has been 100% clear.
Yep.
Because they've done a nice job, but you can't lock down 18 to 22, 23-year-old college football players. It's not feasible to expect them to stay quarantined.
And nearly like 100 programs too. Like,
right,
think of just the number of the programs.
Exactly, just the sheer magnitude of the numbers. It just makes you believe that somebody is going to break it and contract the virus. So for me, if you can pull off the season, I think it needs to be behind closed doors. but even pulling it off at all, it's the numbers behind it just don't seem to me like it's doable. But again, these are all everybody. It's a guessing game right now for everybody. Everybody's making the same guesses. Everybody's trying to figure this all out, and nobody knows what's going to come in a month or two. When we started this show a few months ago, if you would have told us that in August we would be talking about there actually being a possibility of college football being played, I don't know that we would have believed it. So just the fact that we're here from where we were in terms of the all-out complete shutdown, nobody leave your house, to now, for me anyway, trying to forecast out a few months in the future, what was so difficult. Now we know a lot more, but even trying to forecast out a month, nobody's there yet.
Well, given what we do know now, and given everything that we've learned over the last however many months this has been, should we be talking about having a college football season?
Yeah,
right.
That's yeah, exactly.
And that's where I agree, but that's the thing. I completely agree with you. Like, should we be talking about it? It's kind of a different question than the reality of where we're at, which is we are talking about it, and it seems to be, at least right now, like it's going to happen. So if it's going to happen, I do think it needs to be behind closed doors. I mean, it's the only way I think that you can minimize risk for, just across the board. I mean, the Longhorn Athletic Department can do everything within their power to protect the players and coaches. They do not have any control over being able to protect the people and what they do before they enter the stadium and what they do after they leave the stadium. So remove that aspect of it. Why, and that, if you take that part away from it, then the university can, like, what was it? I think I saw this week, UT had 0 positive tests within the 5 sports that have reported for camp. That's great.
They've done a great job so far.
That's great. So, but they can control that factor. UT can't control the 25,000 or so people that may show up on a Saturday and enter the stadium. They have no control over what any of those people do before they show up on game day. They can control the players and staff. And I think as long as you can remove the aspect, like at least control what you can control, then we can have a college football season. But you're asking a lot of moving parts. The number of players, the number of programs, the number of coaches, all those things to just fall into place perfectly. And it would be miraculous, really.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they went through the entire season without any positive tests and it burning through the team kind of thing. Like, oh, that'd be a miracle.
That's why if we're talking about it being a miracle of making it all the way through the season without that happening, that's why I don't understand why this is still up in the air. Like, that's why if we're that unsure that we can pull it off, why are we talking about doing it? Like, the NBA and the NHL have set the standard. They have the model. And they also have the ability to do that because of the type of game that they play and the arenas that they play in. You have none of that with football. And especially college football.
Yeah, so, I do think the NFL has the potential. I do think they have the potential, just by the nature of it only being 32 teams, smaller rosters, and their league employees. The league can force them essentially into a position where they say, if you don't follow protocol, you don't play. You won't get your paycheck. If you don't want to follow protocol, opt out. Which is kind of, I mean, maybe not to that specific term, but like the players have the ability to opt out for whatever reason, which we've discussed here before. We completely agree with. But I think the NFL can pull it off. I think college football is a completely different animal. I mean, the season's going to start, I think, whether we like it or not. I mean, we'll see what happens with the Big Ten stuff, and that leads to any other big breaking news about what this season entails. But it's like we discussed with Major League Baseball. Like, it's different to start the season. It's a totally different thing to finish it, and to finish it in a fashion where everybody seems to say, all right, that went well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Big 12 thing is that everybody has to be tested 72 hours before a sporting event, the athletes. So for the next 3 days, are they not going to go anywhere or do anything, or it's just going to be difficult.
That's what
We'll
happened
see.
with the St. Louis Cardinals, right? That was
Right.
wasn't that their issue? Like there was a delay in them receiving their test results back.
Yep.
And they were what, in Milwaukee or Detroit, or they were waiting to go to Detroit, I think, from Milwaukee, and didn't get their results back, and so they just called the series against Detroit. Then they got the results back and found the 5 or 6 members of the organization were positive. Now here they are with even higher numbers.
Yep. Yeah, it'll be miraculous, but we'll see. But there may be, if there is a season,
Welcome back, everybody. Man, talk about like timely technical stuff happening right there. Right as Jay was about to deliver the payoff on that little tease there about if we were going to have a college football season. Yeah, Zoom decided to step in and have fate go their way. So
it happens.
It happens. It happens. It was good for a laugh that it froze up right before the payoff was coming. So,
Yeah.
So good for a laugh, but actually it's fate did kind of have its way, because if we would have been continuing on through the show, the plan was to have the We're Back segment, as all of you know, that's our most popular segment.
Easily, yeah.
Easily. It's what all the research and, market analysis has shown.
Yeah. We're hitting all the key demographics on when we hit the We're Back segment. We're hitting all the key demos on that one.
Yeah, just knocking it out of the park. I mean,
Easily.
the numbers are through the roof. So,
yeah.
So we were going to go. We're getting into the We're Back segment, but then due to technological mishaps, we had a break, and in the middle of that break, per our discussion about what was going to be happening with the Big Ten and everything like that, some news started to drop. Basically, as we mentioned, that Bruce Feldman kind of is in tune with everything going on here. It sounds like the Big Ten is delayed out, or at least with the slow play of canceling the season. Pat Forty, another college football insider, tweeted out in the middle of the break. His tweet says, "Prominent industry source, quote, I think by the end of the week, the fall sports will be postponed in all conferences." It seems this is picking up a lot of steam as we record today. So I guess we've kind of come to the decision that today, because the plan was next week we were going to have Longhorn insider Michael Holland on with us, and we were going to go, full Longhorn preview, talk recruiting and everything, get in there. So I think Jay, I think we discussed it here before getting back on. I think we're going to forego the We're Back segment this week and kind of see how this news plays out. If we actually have college football season, I guess we'll know by next Saturday. And either way, we're going to have Mike on and talk recruiting and talk everything college football. So
can I still say we're back?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you have to you built it up so well, like you have to deliver. I mean, technically, we are back from the break, so yeah. I mean, if you want to,
we're back.
There we go.
Right,
the sponsors require that Jay has to get that in. So
check the box.
Yeah, we got to make sure that that money keeps rolling in. So
no kidding.
This train doesn't roll itself. So
no kidding. Yeah, we were going to talk a little bit on camp opening up and some recruiting news, but we'll touch on that stuff with Mike next week. What did you want to go ahead and move on to then, Kerry?
Well, I mean, this news kind of got us not off of our flow a little bit here, but I know we kind of mentioned NFL stuff earlier. Any update from the Texans, or what would Bill O'Brien do segment this week?
I feel like he'd find a way to screw up getting Deshaun Watson there long term. It seems like he keeps saying the right things, like Deshaun is the franchise quarterback, and we want Deshaun to be a part of the future of the Texans. And it's like, well, let's pay the guy and show him, because if he goes out there and balls out of control again, that contract, I mean, I just feel like that's not a guy that you can let leave your franchise. He's not the type of guy that you can let leave. And I don't even, like, we were pissed off about the DeAndre Hopkins trade. O'Brien is that's going to one that he's going to wear forever. And whether or not this season plays out the way that he apparently thinks it will tell the tale, I guess, in the long run. But I don't even think that trading away DeAndre Hopkins would be as big a deal as letting Deshaun Watson walk out the door.
No, I completely agree with you there. Completely agree with you. I mean, it's, you mentioned that they're saying all the right things as an organization. We're working hard on it. We want to keep him around. He's a cornerstone player, franchise player.
Mm-hmm.
And they said similar before DeAndre Hopkins' new deal a while back, right? I mean, just cornerstone of the franchise, or, we're working on it. They got the deal done. I think they also said similar about Dwayne Brown when that whole thing, we're working on it. He's a cornerstone, type player for us. Maybe it was mentioned about Clowney. I think there was a little more dispute there about trying to get that worked out. But like, the longer this goes, the less faith I have in them getting it done. The money is not going to get any smaller.
Right.
And like you said, once the season starts and he starts putting up the numbers and all this, like, it's just going to keep going. So if you're, as a franchise, and we don't know the ins and outs of what this negotiation's been, why haven't they been able to get this done? Do you think? I know Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins were close. I mean, I know that he probably wasn't happy about losing the best receiver in football, really.
Yeah, you could definitely argue that for sure.
And having witnessed, he's been in that locker room and witnessed the fallout of Jadeveon Clowney with Bill O'Brien, the fallout with Dwayne Brown and Bill O'Brien, now the fallout with DeAndre Hopkins and Bill O'Brien. He's watched the play caller situation fluctuate week to week, it seems, and probably will be the same this year. I understand why the Texans want to lock down Deshaun Watson. Why would Deshaun Watson want to be locked down by the Texans at this point?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, and to his credit, he's been a pro through it. And this, I love Houston. I love the city. I love the franchise. I love the McNairs. He's gone along with it too. But it's a great point. It's like, what have you done to make me want to be your franchise quarterback? I've had to drag your ass to the playoffs, basically on my own back. It's just one of those things where you hope that he wants to sign long term with Houston, but you're right.
Of course,
maybe it's not going to be the right move for him in his own eyes. So we'll see, man. It's just I hope they can get it done, but.
I'm curious what the holdup is. Yeah, and that's where I don't know. None of us know what side the holdup is kind of coming from, and we talk about like the Dak Prescott thing. Like, that was kind of out in the open what the issues were there. One side wanted a contract of a certain length, one side wanted money of a certain. That was pretty well public information about why the Cowboys and Dak Prescott weren't able to get a long-term deal done before franchising him. Yeah, this just seems a little different. It's I don't know. I think they'll get it done before the season.
Well,
I think they will.
They need to. And to be fair, I think we would both agree that Dak Prescott is no Deshaun Watson. And Deshaun Watson, early on, like, I feel like the contract that Dak will sign with Dallas will be for $40 million a year. And it's obviously not going to be this year, but next year, if they re-sign him, that's what it's going to take to keep him around. This year, Deshaun Watson, for me, is already in that $40 million. If you sign him, I think Deshaun Watson will make $40 million a year, on average, at least. So if you wait until next season to do, if you try to do it after the fact, he might even command more than that. So I think this isn't a gamble that you take as an organization with this type of a player. If he walks out the door, it's one of those things that you regret, and it's a stain on your organization as long as forever. That's one of the ones that got away. So they got to find a way to do it, man. It's funny. I get all these notifications all day long on the phone, sports articles and blah blah blah. And one of them said it was on the Texans or whatever, and it talked about David Johnson being very confident going into camp and all that, which is okay. I'm glad he's saying that and he feels that way. That's good. But then in quotation marks underneath it, the second bullet said, "Does Bill O'Brien have a plan?" And I just thought that it was very fitting of a sort of a bullet point on a push notification to just straight out question, does this guy even have a plan for what he's doing this season and how this franchise should be run?
Sounds like they're viewers. Sounds like they're viewers of the show. Something stealing our material to go, write articles in USA Today.
Social
but
media
hey,
teams, yeah.
Imitation's sincerest form of flattery. So
no kidding,
we'll take
man.
that.
So thank you guys.
Thank you. To answer that question though, I don't think Bill O'Brien has a plan.
Oh yeah. No,
he might think he does, but it just like with the lead in Kansas City. He thinks. I don't think he might have a plan, but as soon as something goes against that plan, he has no backup plan. Basically,
yeah.
I think he just
worst
there's no thinking ahead for him
in history. It's just yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Bill Belichick, who is encouraging his players to opt out so he could have the number 1 pick and get Trevor Lawrence in the draft next year. Like that's 3-dimensional chess there.
Yeah. He's playing chess, 3D chess, and O'Brien's playing tiddlywinks.
Yeah. So, what if that actually happened? Like, actually played out that way? Where half the Patriots opted out, and Belichick does end up getting the number 1 pick. It gets Trevor Lawrence, and it's like, told you.
I think Cam Newton could drag a team to 6 wins, man. I don't know, 5 wins. I don't know.
He has to, right?
Even Cam Newton at this stage in his career, I feel like could just his presence alone, if he's on the field, you would get the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
But Belichick, it's Belichick. Are you going to question Bill Belichick figuring out a way to get something done that he wants? I'm not questioning his ability to make it happen.
He'll, if anything, he would figure out a way to flip players into draft picks and get in that spot. He'll work it out
easily.
That's what he always does, Well,
the evil genius.
Yeah. Well, moving on from one football to another, Arsenal FA Cup champs.
Yeah.
As we ended last week's show right before kickoff, I got to toot my own horn a little bit on this. I nailed the prediction.
Sure
said
did,
2-1 to Arsenal. Aubameyang with the big day, which he scored the 2 goals. Now we await to see what the contract situation brings, but great result. It gets Arsenal back into European play for next season, without having to play any qualifiers for the tournament either, which is great.
Yes.
So all around a pretty solid weekend for Arsenal. And in classic Arsenal fashion, a few days later, they announced the laying off of 55 employees from the club. That's a totally different mess in its own right, including most of the scouting department, which is interesting. They're apparently playing a lot of the agent connections now to sign players, which is why the names being linked with Arsenal this week, Philippe Coutinho and Willian, are clients of the super agents that are now getting super cozy with Arsenal. So Willian is close to 33, kind of on the back end of his career, but is set to make pretty decent money if he signs with Arsenal. I'm hearing it's going to be like a 3-year contract, I think. So we'll see how that goes. I think he has something to provide. I'm not saying that it's a bad kind of signing to bring into the club, but
well, it seems like the kind of guy that Arteta wants to bring into the locker room. I think there's something to be said for paying the guy wages to, and when he's on top of his game, he's one of those guys that he's a top guy. You know, he can go out there and change a game for you on any given match day. When he's on his game, and you take that along with the presence that he'll have in the locker room, the example that he sets, just being the type of footballer that he is. I think that you can sort of say, okay, if we have to, it's maybe more wages than we would pay for the production we're going to get on the field, but there's more to that in a young club that Arteta is really trying to, really solidify that culture within the club. So there's something to be said for being able to bring in a guy like Williams. So, and now it would give him an opportunity. He would get out from underneath. Now it'll be Pulisic that he's would be fighting for playing time against. Even though I saw that he might not be ready for the start of the season because of the hammy. I believe it was a hamstring injury in that last game.
Yeah, that was where that hamstring popped on him, which he still impressively found a way to keep running and also try to take a shot after after that hamstring popped on him. But yeah, he's going to miss some time. I agree. I mean, I think Willian has something to provide. I think, he's a professional.
Yep.
I know he's had some injury issues and stuff like that, but I think he is someone that can provide something of leadership and, the Coutinho signing, if that does come to fruition, I think that is something to be excited about. I think he's 26. He was with Bayern Munich this past season on loan from Barcelona, former Liverpool player, so he's familiar with the Premier League, and was very good with Liverpool. And so I don't know if that would be a loan signing from Barcelona or if anything that would be permanent from that. I wouldn't imagine being permanent given the financial situation, but we'll see how it turns out. There's going to be a lot of turnover, I think, this summer. There's a quick turnaround. I think, we're only a few weeks out from things restarting with the Community Shield against Liverpool, and then the season starts in September. But there's going to be a lot of players coming in and out. I think they're going to have to find a way to dump off Mesut Ozil somewhere, get out from under that contract. The players that Arteta doesn't get along or hasn't gotten along with, like Matteo Guendouzi, I think is on the way out.
Yep.
I talked today, Lucas Torreira might be on the way out. Apparently the club has said Ainsley Maitland-Niles is surplus and that he's for sale. It's going to be an interesting few weeks for Arsenal. We'll see how it plays out. Jay, anything you want to add on Arsenal? Anything from the FA Cup final? Any players that you'd like to see come in or go or anything like that over the next few weeks?
Yeah, it's just the way that you just described what the next couple of weeks, what the next few weeks are going to look like, really lets me know that Arteta is fully, he's fully implementing his plan, his way of doing things, of running a club, of managing a club, of coaching a club, of bringing in the players that he wants. He's creating that culture the way that he wants to do it, and I feel like he's going to be given quite a long leash to try to pull this off. I don't think he's going to be one of those guys where if Arsenal are struggling at the middle of next season, that there'll be talks immediately of sacking him like during the midseason or anything like that. I feel like he's a guy that will be given the length of a season to fully implement what he wants to do and try to bring this system into place. So in that regard, I feel like he has to feel confident in bringing in the type of players that he wants to be able to achieve those goals. And I think that he's going to be there. I think Arteta is going to be that. I'm not saying Arsenal are a top 2 or 3 club next year, but I don't think you're going to see them swimming around the middle of the table anymore.
No, I think, yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be back in the kind of top 4 race.
Yeah.
But I think you made a great point about, kind of his vision, Arteta's vision, and kind of what he wants going forward. And I think that's going to be something to remember over these next few weeks when people will probably get upset or throw a fit over certain players that are sold or, things like that. And I think the important thing to remember for that is, like, not everybody's going to agree with whoever is sold or brought in, but at least there's a consistent vision, like there's a purpose behind it, kind of thing. And I think that that's going to be the main thing to remember, is that I like Maitland Niles. I mean, like personally, I don't want him. He's a player that I think can provide something. He can play a lot of different positions, and he was great in the FA Cup final and in the semifinal. I think he should stick around. But if Arteta doesn't have a place for him, then he should go somewhere
Right.
to play full time, and Arsenal can get some money for him too to help make the squad better and do what he envisions it doing. So
Yep.
it's just nice to have a plan, or at least have someone in place that has a plan, where that wasn't always the case before.
Didn't seem to be.
So moving on a little bit, let's get into the NHL.
Yeah.
We're getting close to the end of it's not technically the first round. The NHL has declared it as the qualifying round and the round robin, and we've mentioned this before on the show. The round robin was the top 4 seeds from each conference playing each other to determine seeding for the next round. The qualifying round were teams 5 through 12 in each conference, playing a best of 5 series to advance. And now next week, those top 4 seeds will then enter in, and we'll have it'll get back kind of the traditional 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7 type format, and best of 7 series that the NHL has typically had. Jay, have you watched any of the NHL playoffs since it's returned?
Well, that was another one of those realizations that I had, that I thought I would watch more, and I haven't. I've watched a few games so far. It's entertaining. I love watching hockey. I just don't seem to make time to watch hockey. When I watch the games, I always enjoy it, and I'm trying to explaining it to Finley, and I just try to, basically for him, I just have to say it's like soccer but on ice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the closest I can get, because the kid loves soccer. So basically but watching it's been great, but I haven't made any extra time for it. Playoff hockey, though, I do tend to, just like in the NBA, I tend to watch some playoff hockey, especially when it's the bigger clubs. But unfortunately, we talk about the bigger clubs. That doesn't necessarily mean, like, you look at some of these 5-12 matchups that have gone down, Kerry, and it doesn't. The teams that are maybe up higher in the standings on a regular basis don't necessarily seem to be coming out on the better end of some of these series.
No, it has been pretty compelling. If you're someone that likes seeing the upset story, I mean, in the Western Conference, the 12 seed Chicago Blackhawks, which they've been so successful over the years, it's hard to think that they were the 12th seed, a team that in a typical year was way out of the playoff race. They were the 12th seed for a reason. The top 8 would only get in. So the fact that they made the cutoff, but then not only made the cutoff, but then took out the number 5 seed Edmonton Oilers to advance is huge. But not only was it a huge upset, like the league would love that, but it was one of the bigger, more popular teams in the country.
Right.
That was the number 12 seed that did it.
Big hockey market there, for sure.
Huge. And the same thing happened in the East, where the number 5 seed Pittsburgh Penguins with Sidney Crosby, another very successful team over the last 10, 15 years, they get knocked out by the number 12 seed Montreal Canadiens, who another massive. I mean, the Canadiens are the most successful team in club in NHL history, more Stanley Cups than anybody else by a very, very wide margin. And by the way, Canada as a country hasn't had a team win a Stanley Cup since '92, I think. So, that only kind of bolsters a little bit of the interest and everything there. But
yeah,
it's been incredibly compelling.
They can't be happy about losing Crosby that early in the playoffs. But in terms of, because it's just like, people say they want to watch the underdogs win, and until, like, in the NCAA tournament they win, and then nobody ends up watching the next games, right? So when you have the Chicago upset in terms of the seeding is one thing, because Chicago's a big hockey market, and that's good for the league. But losing Sidney Crosby, in your qualifying round, when any other year that guy would at least have an actual playoff series to be in, for you to highlight him, is that's not probably the best case scenario for the league. But there is some good hockey being played. There's some bad hockey being played. But I think overall, what the NHL has done to bring eyes to their sport during this time, I think they've done a good enough job of it, at least.
Yeah, and I think one more on the upset note, but also in terms of getting new eyes on the game, another one of the big upsets this week was the Arizona Coyotes eliminating the Nashville Predators. And Nashville was a team that was in the Stanley Cup final a few seasons ago. They've become kind of a prominent marquee franchise in the league over the last few years because of their playoff success. They were in the Winter Classic against the Dallas Stars this season, actually. And then they were knocked out by the Arizona Coyotes, who is a team that the NHL has been, doing everything within their power to try to establish as, a team that gets some attention and gets some success. And here we are. The Coyotes, the 11 seed, have advanced on. They're going to be into the next round. And what could be very, very interesting is that depending on how this finishes out today and tomorrow with the seeding, we could have an Arizona Coyotes Vegas Golden Knights matchup in this first round of the playoffs. You talk about the league building some interest in an area
Right.
of the country. What a better way to do it than have a 7-game series between Phoenix and Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And
two of the hottest places during where any games will ever be played, and it's 110 degrees outside. Why not go inside and cool down and watch some hockey?
But to kind of connect the dots here a little bit on the next note, I'm mentioning the fascinating, the compelling hockey that's been happening. Huge comeback last night. Toronto Maple Leafs, another one of the league's marquee teams, was facing elimination. They were down 3-0 against the Columbus Blue Jackets in the third period. Under 4 minutes left to go in the game. Toronto scores 3 to force overtime. And then Phoenix, Arizona native Austin Matthews, who's been the best player for the Maple Leafs this postseason and their best player overall, former #1 draft pick, Phoenix native, Mexican-American descent, scores the winning goal for the Toronto Maple Leafs to stave off elimination and force a Game 5 in that series. So we talk about the league wanting to build, Phoenix and Arizona into this, kind of build youth hockey and all that stuff there. Well, there's a product of that with Austin Matthews, the Toronto Maple Leafs, helping keep them alive. But just an incredible game. The hockey's getting better. I feel like it's kind of, now that these series are really getting going, it's getting much more heated and competitive, and we shall see. But the Dallas Stars haven't been so competitive in their round robin games. They had a lead against Vegas, blew that in the third period, and then were just stomped by the Colorado Avalanche the other night. They have one more game against the St. Louis Blues in the round robin to determine who's going to be the 3 or 4 seed. It's the Blues, so you'd think that the Stars should be able to get up for that, but they need to get it going. Right now, they've lost 8 straight going back to before the season was put on hold. And they're looking at facing another team, the Vancouver Canucks, that pulled an upset to advance, or the Calgary Flames. So we'll see, but it's been fun. I've been tuned in. I love the way that they've staggered the start times, like the NCAA tournament. I know I can turn on the TV at 11 o'clock in the middle of the workday, and the first game's getting going, and can just play it out the whole day. So it's been fun.
Yeah, it's going to be, playoff hockey is, like I said earlier, playoff hockey is sort of when I will pay attention and a little bit more. And with some of these names, I'm starting to know more of the bigger names of the game. I'm starting to learn who these stars are. And I forget the guy's name already. It was a difficult name, but he had a hat trick the other night. He was second overall pick a couple of years ago. Young guy, and had a hat trick the other night. And I was like, oh, okay, that would be somebody. Obviously, I forgot his name already, and I'm saying – but the guy
was it Connor McDavid for Edmonton?
No, it was a guy with the long last name. I forget what I don't want to try to butcher it, but my point is that it was a guy. Like, now I'm thinking about it, and I'm gonna want to go back to figure out who it was. But it at least got me interested in a new player specifically that plays, a new hockey player for me to at least take the time to Google, do some research, figure out what team he plays for. Oh yeah, okay, maybe I'll tune in for that game. So I've at least gotten to that point with hockey, which is farther along than I was before. So I think that at least so far, even if the NHL if I have an interest in one or two players after coming out of this, it would be a
Yeah.
win, I guess. And I think that there's plenty of people around the country that are doing the same.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've had friends reach out that have never had any interest in hockey before. They've been like, "Hey, I've been watching this. This is really great." Like, you know, they've even started like adopting teams throughout this. It's like, "Oh, well, I picked up. I'm a Carolina Hurricanes fan now, and that's who I'm latching on to and going through these playoffs." I think it's wonderful. It's been nice to kind of see people who weren't traditionally or really interested in hockey before getting more interest in it. And as we mentioned before, like with the NBA and what the NHL, what they've done to protect the players and do this the right way, it's
Yep.
it's been great to see. So
Well, it was Svechnikov.
oh
Uh,
yeah,
he
yeah,
he
for
had the
Carolina.
first
Yeah.
he had the first hat trick, first postseason hat trick in Carolina history. I was watching that one. I saw that develop, and I was like, okay. They gave a little bit of background on the guy, and I was like, all right, now I want to know that he had a hat trick in the playoffs. Okay, big deal. Let me learn about this guy.
Oh
So
yeah, that guy's a monster. He's
yeah,
incredibly fun to watch. And the Carolina Hurricanes are a fun team to watch. So that's they were I think the only one to sweep their first best of 5 matchup and move on. So it's going to get a little tougher for them the next round, but good team. It's been fun. But well, Jay, I think that's about it. What do we got? What else we got going on today? We got a breakfast wrap.
yeah. Let's wrap this thing on up. My Seattle Kraken have hired the first full-time black play-by-play announcer in NHL history. So, already with the logo and the release of all that stuff and of their branding, everything that they've done so far has impressed. Really making a statement by hiring the first full-time black play-by-play announcer in the league. So big ups to them. I thought it was a pretty cool deal.
Yeah, good work by the Kraken. Yeah, I mean, if anything, you can spin these playoffs essentially like acting as a scout for who the Seattle Kraken can pick up in the expansion draft.
Yeah.
I don't think Svechnikov will be available. I think he might end up being protected by Carolina. But like,
I
you
would
know,
guess.
it's you can start putting some eyes out there. So whenever they go through that expansion draft, you can go, all right,
Yeah.
this will be a good team. So yeah, good move by the Kraken. They've knocked everything out of the park so far. They're I don't want to say, it's hard to top what Vegas did in their first season as an expansion
Right.
team by making the Stanley Cup final. But Seattle's just crushing everything. And so they're setting themselves up for a lot of success, and maybe it won't happen the first year, but they're on the way.
Yep. They're doing everything right so far. That's for sure.
Well, what else we got, Jay? I think that's about
Yeah.
it.
It's a busy week this week with sports, and we'll hopefully have another busy week of sports without a ton of games being canceled. It's been nice again to be able to have actual sports on this side of the pond to discuss, and hopefully we can continue to stay safe enough and take care of each other enough to where we can continue to have these leagues. But by the next time we talk, we might have another big announcement in terms of college football, as we mentioned earlier. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and I know the plan is still to have Longhorn Insider Mike Holland on next week, and
Yeah.
We'll see how kind of this week plays out in terms of the college football thing, and if any of these discussions about cancellations end up coming to fruition. But
Yeah, we'll have Mike on regardless to talk
yeah,
recruiting and the developments of the season. So no matter what, tune in next week and we'll have some good conversation with Mike, and And depending on what the news is, it could go any direction. So hope you guys tune in next week.
Yep. Don't forget like and smash that subscribe button.
Yeah, we're up to 25 subscribers now, man, aren't we? I think it's like 25 now.
That sounds great. Yeah,
broke the quarter century mark on the subscribers. All right.
That's right. We're
Guys.
We're closing in on that 10,000 subscriber mark. So let's keep flooring it. Tell your friends and family.
Yeah.
If basically just create as many fake YouTube accounts as you possibly can and just start hitting that subscribe button.
Yeah, whatever you got to do. I mean, we're on the rocket ship. Rocket has been strapped. We're on our way to 10,000 subscribers now. So
that's right. That's right. Hop on the bandwagon now.
Hop on now and tell your neighbors.
That's right. Well, man, it's been fun. Yeah, let's do it again next week.
Sounds good, man. Peace.
Right. Thanks, everybody.
ATX representing. Fatal, baby.
All in 06 on a Saturday.